And this was probably the biggest example that you hear the most. And I tried to find, I've seen some people say sort of a definition of grace, but it's not receiving what you deserve, but receiving what you don't deserve, or something along those lines. And the fact that, we don't deserve the grace that God gives us. There's nothing we can do to earn that. We don't deserve it. And so, of course, 2 Samuel 9 and 23. 9, 2 and 3, not 23. 2 and 3. Now there was a servant of the house of Saul whose name was Ziba, and they called him to David. And the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" And he said, "I am your servant." And the king said, "Is there not still someone of the house of Saul, that I may show the kindness of God to him?" Ziba said to the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is crippled in his feet." The king said to him, "Where is he?" And Ziba said to the king, "He is in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, at Lodebar." The king David sent and brought him from the house to him. And Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, said to Saul, son of Saul, came to David and fell on his face and paid homage. And David said, "Mephibosheth," and he answered, "Behold, I am your servant." And David said to him, "Do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan, and I will restore to you all the land of Saul your father, and you shall eat at my table always." And he paid homage and said, "What is your servant that you should show regard for a dead dog such as I?" Then the king called Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, "All that belonged to Saul and to all his house I have given to your master's grandson. And you and your sons and your servants shall till the land for him, and shall bring in the produce, that your master's grandson may have bread to eat. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, shall always eat at my table." Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, "According to all that my lord the king commands his servant, so will your servant do." So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons, and Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah. And all who lived in Ziba's house became Mephibosheth's servants. So Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem, for he ate always at the king's table. Now he was lame in both of his feet. It really is. It really is. It's, when the servant was asked, the author here talks about why did he choose Mephibosheth? One, because there were probably other descendants still out there. And was the servant maybe not too sure, was David going to be lenient, or was he looking to be more like a typical king and to start to get rid of the household of Saul? And so did he choose one that was crippled, because of what he was afraid of? And we don't know. That's the author's commentary here. But you're right. When first of all, just the fact that we're seeking someone out. We didn't just let it die with the people we made the promise to. But then and he wasn't just kind to him. He didn't just leave him alone and let him live in peace as he had been in hiding since they all died. But David didn't just let him continue to live like that. He actually elevated him.
At that time, that was, like you said, the kings usually took care of the other families. That way they couldn't be anybody heirs to come back.
Mm-hmm.
But you look in the mindset of the servant that you just said, that brought it forward, but also, I can't say it,
Mm-hmm.
His mind, they come to get him and carry him. In his mind, I'm about to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm about to die. The servant said this is what they're going to do to him. But it turns out totally opposite what they thought. Kind of like grace is to us. I mean, we deserve this. This is the way it should be. But Christ is there to show us grace and mercy.
That's right. Yeah. So when he went in before the king, so the fourth point that our author makes is grace can drive away our fears. And so his fears were driven away with David's opening statement of, did I mean you no harm? Let me find it here. Behold, I am your servant, verse 7. And David said to him, do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan, and I will restore to you all the land. You know, so he took away that fear with that statement that, behold, I mean you no harm. And we talk about grace being extended to us because of someone else. Show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan, and I will restore to you all the land of Saul, your father. Yeah, my Bible's got a misprint there, doesn't it? Kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan, and I will restore to you all of the land of Saul, your father. Is there some sort of imagery there that I'm missing?
Sometimes
Are you not following along?
a grandfather could be regarded as
Okay.
father. It's just
Yeah. But Saul was his grandfather, absolutely. Okay. So who are we shown grace on behalf of? So the grace that we get, that God grants us, who is that on behalf of? Jesus, right. Right. So we, because of what Jesus did, you know, we're shown that grace, you know, that God gives us today. Absolutely. You know, and I think Mephibosheth is a great example of he couldn't earn that grace due to his physical impairment. You know, we sometimes struggle with that, earning our salvation and earning our way into heaven, right? And Mephibosheth was a good example that, man, really all he could do was exist based on his, you know, disability. He was apparently so the Bible reveals the reason for Mephibosheth's disability. Years ago, King Saul and Prince Jonathan had died in a terrible battle on the slopes of Mount Gilboa. A messenger rushed to the place to tell the awful news, and Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son that was lame of his feet. He was 5 years old when the tidings came of Saul and Jonathan out of Jezreel. And his nurse took him up and fled. And it came to pass, she made haste to flee, and he fell and became lame. And his name was Mephibosheth. And so he was actually, I guess, dropped as a child that caused this lameness. But as I think more about Mephibosheth and then compare it to us today with God and His grace, I mean, we're just 100% reliant on Him is what we're supposed to be. It's not something that we can earn. There's nothing we can do. Yes, there's commands that we're supposed to do as children of God, but we can't earn it. I mean, He has given that to us out of the goodness of His heart. And so Mephibosheth couldn't earn his way to the king's table in this story. There's no work he probably could have done for King David, right? I mean, he's lame. They didn't really have the advances in medicine that we have today for people who would be in his situation. He probably is moved around by somebody on a day-to-day basis, and there's not a whole lot he can do. Mm-hmm. Right. Absolutely. And that's the word I'm looking for is on the tip of my tongue. Submit. I mean, we've got to submit to him to receive that grace, you know. That's right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and even I think his reaction when he's brought in front of David is the example. That before he knew what was coming, he submitted. Yeah, you know, that here it is. Here's my fate. And so I think the point I'm getting to is works without faith, faith without works, you know, that we just can't earn our way into anything. We have to submit and do his will to be in that grace. Absolutely. And so, Mike?
Another way to look at that is, today we inherit, our grace from God by being children of God.
Okay, yep.
You know, what we need to do to be his child. By the same token, what's his name?
Mephibosheth? Thank you, Josh, for introducing that to us.
He inherited,
Yeah.
by being Jonathan's son, he inherited, he didn't earn it either.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. He inherited it. Could Mephibosheth have turned it away and not accepted it? Okay. All right. So why would people not want to accept the inheritance you're talking about? And that's the point I'm getting to is he could have said, nope, you're not, I'm a part of Saul's. I guess he could have been that allegiant to the family of Saul and said, no, I'm not going to accept any gifts or any comfort from another king.
There was actually one of Saul's remaining relatives actually kind of took a mini rebellion against David, and
Yep.
it looked as if Mephibosheth didn't really, I'll say endorse it, but it didn't look like he was denying it either. Yet David still, when all was said and done, upheld what he promised to do, which again is just a perfect example of the grace of God, because there are times that we've shown the grace of God, but it's still there for us to take advantage of when we return. So David very easily could have said, you know what, that was, you chose your side and acted against him, but he didn't.
And you were referring to, who was it that was king of part of Jerusalem for a little while? Is it Ishbosheth? Yeah. And so Josh is talking about when David was first fully installed as king, and Ishbosheth was also king of part of Jerusalem at that time. And that, Mephibosheth was more than likely, or was loyal to Ishbosheth, who was a part of the family. And then once Ishbosheth is out and ended up, like I say, his head was delivered to David on a platter, but Mephibosheth was still offered that grace even after he had been loyal to a competing king. And so, that grace was still available to him when he came back around, if I'm explaining that right there, Josh. And so, we don't always accept the grace and walk in the light as we're supposed to, but it's always an option to come back to. We can always turn ourselves around and come back and be in here. And so, grace can drive away our fears. So we mentioned that, Mephibosheth's fear that he was about to be executed was driven away when David said, I'm about to take care of you, and here's what we're fixing to do. I mean you no harm. He points out when David called his name, Mephibosheth mustered up the strength to humbly say, "Behold thy servant." What do you think about that statement in that situation?
I believe he is fully in the mindset he was fixing to die.
Okay.
And it turned around. Kind of back what Mike was talking about inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
Then, if you didn't do it, I mean, you was going to die right then.
Yeah.
Now, we don't think we're going to die right now if we don't. So that's another one of the human things we push off and don't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, you can see I say gratitude, relief, I'm not gonna die. This is what I've gotta do.
Yeah.
He is showing me grace for it.
He wasn't defiant when he said that. When David addressed him and called him by name, he didn't, muster up the courage to say, "Hail, King Saul." He wasn't defiant against David in that situation. And I don't really know the point that I'm making with that, but it just kind of stuck out to me that, he did submit when David brought him in and David called him by name. And so, and I guess you could tie that back to when David was approached for his sins. How did he react? He wasn't defiant against it. He accepted them. And not so much that Mephibosheth had done anything wrong here, but just based on what I've read about the way these kingdoms take over, he wasn't defiant in that situation. He wasn't so convinced that this is it, this is the end, I'm going to make one last stand for the family. He submitted to, God's current anointed king, even though he was not part of the family and more than likely in general times was about to be executed. So the grace of God should help to drive away our fears. We read in Hebrews 13:5-6, "Let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content with such things as ye have. For he hath said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee, so that we may boldly say, The Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me." How easy is it for us to be discontented Christians? But when Jesus is our King, we have all we need. He knows our needs and circumstances, and He has pledged to take care of us. How far down do we believe in that and rely on that, that Jesus got us, is just taken care of. You in those comments, you gotta expand on that. How do we take care of him? Okay, okay. All right.
Kind of like those works for your faith that you were talking about a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
Those works are not for God, they're for us to live our lives. God doesn't need the works that we do.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
We need the works that we do to please God.
That's right. To please God, to be the light and the salt that he's commanded us to be.
For ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
What about Job? Job still had his faith with God, even though he lost everything he had.
Lost everything.
And I should say we should be able to be in that same way.
Mm-hmm.
We're all very well comfortable, got all the needs covered, life is beautiful, but what if we lost it all? You know, would we still have that confidence and comfort knowing that Christ is still got it?
Right.
We may lose it here, but we probably got to go forward.
And I guess that's what I always go back to, is all the way to death. You know, am I, even if I am facing death like Mephibosheth was potentially facing in this situation, am I okay with that? You know, is it, God's got this. Even if I don't live through whatever I'm facing, I'm fine. I'll have my reward. Or am I clinging too tight to this life? I guess would be the point, you know.
But I think like we talked about before, it's not necessarily clinging to this life for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to leave our spouse.
That's right.
Our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that I would necessarily, I think, be scared of the
Mhm.
next step. I wouldn't want to miss, I wouldn't want them to suffer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
There's you personally went through a situation where we felt faced death,
Mm-hmm.
faced it head on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's probably, having that example is probably the reason I talk like I do and think like I do when it comes to death. I mean, it was not shied away from. And to the very end, it was more concerned with everybody else. You know, it was.
Let's go see what God's got.
Absolutely. Well, and so, you know, the statement was made. He said, I've lived my whole life to be in heaven. That's what this is all about. None of this other stuff matters. I'm not fixing to take a piece of this with me. This is what the goal is. This is what we live for. And then it was, as y'all know, he had a huge family. And not just his kids, but he was one of 7 himself. And they all came through in the final couple of weeks. And they asked every single one of them the exact same question. Am I going to see you over there? You know, he was more worried about, he knew his position. He knew where he was fixing to be. He was concerned about everybody else. And so, you know, I always think about that when we're struggling worldly, when it comes to, well, how am I going to pay for this? Or, you know, what do I need to be, you know, setting the kids up for or whatever, you know, none of that matters. If I'm raising them to be in the Lord, that's my job. Everything else is just window dressing in this life that he either lets us do or doesn't let us do. You know, we're all blessed with different things and different opportunities, but we're all going for the same goal, and that's that grace that he's going to take care of us to the very end. And as Larry said, if we've taken care of God's work here on earth as we're supposed to do, you know, that's the biggest job for us. Psalms 118:6, the Lord is on my side, I will not fear. What can man do unto me? So to me, that scripture still goes back to, even if man kills me, even if something, and there's a lot of, especially on social media, so if you're not there, that's probably good. But there's a lot of preparation, you need to have 6 months of food supply stocked up. You need to have certain radios stocked up. And if we go to World War III and I see a lot of just planning for surviving the absolute worst is what is going on in the world today. There's a lot of it's fear-mongering and trying to sell stuff, but there's a lot of people who take that very, very seriously in the prepping community probably. And my thought always comes back to, man, why would I want to survive that? That doesn't sound like there's going to be much left to enjoy if it all goes the way that you guys are saying it's, nuclear holocaust or whatever. Why would I want to be here? I'd rather be done and not have to try to mess with that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of, it just seems in the world today in general, there's a lot of emphasis on surviving, trying to take care of ourselves instead of letting God take care of us and let His plan, whether we worldly survive whatever comes or we don't, who really cares? Just my opinion. Grace should be humbly accepted. We've got a few minutes left. 2 Samuel 9 and verse 8, and he bowed himself and said, this is Mephibosheth, what is thy servant that thou should look upon such a dead dog as I am? It is. That's flat out, I don't deserve what you're doing, and, why? Grace would not be forced upon Mephibosheth against his will. He could easily have been filled with bitterness and hatred due to the circumstances of his life and rejected the offer defiantly. Instead, he humbly accepted David's gracious offer. He knew he was a dead dog, but due to David's kindness, an abundant life would be his. And that was kind of the point I was making earlier. His injuries were supposedly due to fleeing from David or David's armies. And even though it was God's plan that Saul would fall and that David would take over, he still could have had that defiant stand for the family and not accept this gift. And so, what do we see today when, are there people that are just not willing to accept this gift that God has made available? Okay. Okay, but I believe instead of, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, sir.
I just wondered, he didn't say I'm a dog, he said I'm a dead dog. Makes me wonder if he's not dealing with human pride and application. We don't deserve grace, that's been addressed. But do we really believe we're not God's gift to humanity? Do we really accept the fact that we do all sin and fall short of the glory of God? Not a single one of us is deserving.
Mm-hmm.
Which would make us much more appreciative of what God has done for us.
Absolutely.
I think the humble side of it is showing humility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
No, that's not yours to determine.
Mm-hmm.
That's God's grace.
Absolutely, yeah. We don't determine the extent of grace. That's God to determine.
I'm wrong, and it's,
Yeah, that's right. And, but you're exactly right. It's not just continuing to do what we want to do and saying that grace will cover us. And to your point here, that we had a Devo or class, it's been a while back now, but the fact that we are destitute without God, there is no hope without God. And when you think about that word destitute, that is somebody who is 100% reliant on someone else. You know, there's nothing that person can do. You know, maybe it's somebody who's hadn't eaten in several days, they don't have a penny to their name, and if somebody doesn't stop and help them, they're going to die.
So we work out of our salvation, we don't work into it. So
Mm.
when God finds us, then we are motivated by His love and grace
That's right.
to live for Him, but it's out of our salvation.
That's right. We work out of our salvation, not into it. That's probably the best I've heard that put. That's as simple and as clear, I think, as I've heard that put. We work out of our salvation. And that love produces, the love that we should have because of the salvation we've been offered should produce the works that we do. Well, I think that's the best place to end right there today. Yeah. It's not the way it works. Exactly. Exactly. All right, let's see here. So next week, which will be our last week of our David study before June, so this will be the Shepherd's Psalm, and it'll be Psalm 23. Will be what we're looking at. Psalms chapter 23. Thank you all very much.